Hello once again. Thanks for dropping in on the Mountain West Network studio as we get set to dive deep into the headlines of Mountain West men's basketball with our analyst Andy Glockner. Before we do that, let's take a look at the updated standings in the Mountain West. Wyoming right now as we approach the halfway point of the conference season, leading the way at 6-1. Colorado State and San Diego State and Fresno State all 5-2. New Mexico 5-3. Boise State and Utah State come in at 4-3. Nevada, UNLV, Air Force, and San Jose State round out the bottom half of the Mountain West. Let's start with Colorado State, who came off a very impressive win on Saturday night over San Diego State. They're now 18-2, best start in school history. Larry Eustace, after the game that you saw against Wyoming, admitted that his team maybe wasn't ready for a game of that magnitude. Maybe got spooked by the moment. Sellout crowd, huge game. They came a long way because that certainly was not the case against San Diego State. What have we learned from that moment against Wyoming to the big win over the Aztecs on Saturday?
Well, first off, we've learned that Larry likes to tell stories, so you have to take whatever he says with a grain of salt. I think there was some truth to his team not being ready. Now, whether it was for injuries and or development and or suspensions and or all the stuff they dealt with for the last few weeks, they may have caught that Wyoming game at not a great time for them. I don't think it had anything to do with the crowd. I mean, 5,000 or 7,000 or 8,000 in Moby is not a huge difference. It was a big game against a good team. They ended up losing at home. I do think he has been accurate, though, that the team has improved. I think they are in a better spot than they were 2 or 3 weeks ago. Their depth is significantly better than it has been under Larry Eustace. Even that team a couple of years ago that was good did not have this type of quality depth coming off the bench. And they're figuring out now how to use guys like John Gillen and Gian Clavel to their advantage. So now when you have Bejarano back in the lineup and you have Avila back in the lineup, you have a lot of ways you can go. A very diverse offensive team that sort of covers some of their deficiencies defensively. I think it's inarguable at this point, probably the best offensive team in the league, most devastating power punch, so to speak. We saw what they did against Nevada. We saw what they did against lesser opponents, and then they hit San Diego State this weekend with a pretty big early punch and held them off down the stretch.
Got a couple of pivotal games here for the Rams coming up this week. They're at Boise State and then hosting Fresno State on Saturday. Let's talk about the Aztecs off of that loss in Fort Collins, but they've been pretty impressive over the last week. Averaged 75 points for the week. A big reason for that, the freshman Malik Pope, a 5-star recruit out of the Sacramento area. He was unconscious for the week, especially against Colorado State. 22 points. He was 12 of 15 for the week and 5 of 5 from beyond the arc. Here's a kid that certainly lived up to the hype, at least over the last week.
It's nice to be 6'9", 6'10", and be able to shoot like that. You know, this is the new way that basketball is going. You see it at the pro level. Now we're seeing it more in a stretch 4, even a stretch 5 sense at the college level. And a guy like Pope emerging for San Diego State is a big plus for them. We've talked repeatedly on this show about San Diego State's offensive limitations and how while their defense will keep them in every game, their offense keeps most other teams in games as well. I don't think they're going to average 75 points a game the rest of the way. I mean, if they do, they're going to win the league. You know, I mean, let's be honest. If they've figured this out to the point where they have that much buffer room, they're going to, I don't want to say run the table, but they're going to be favored probably in every game left if their offense is capable. They're going to win a good number of games by a huge margin, and then they've got people coming into Viejas. You know, they'll get some revenge shots at some of the teams. Colorado State, Wyoming, I believe, goes back down there as well. So, you know, they're in pretty good shape with 2 losses right now. They have kind of found themselves. They, along with Colorado State, I think, are the 2 teams that are sort of improving when you talk about the contenders versus a Wyoming, which I think is we know what they are and they've done what we expected them to do. Now let's see what they can do the second half of the schedule.
UNLV got a much-needed win on Saturday over Utah State. Snatched victory from the jaws of defeat, so to speak, and really a big reason for that was Rashad Vaughn on the mid-season watch list now for the Freshman of the Year, the National Freshman of the Year. He was sensational. 31 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals against Utah State. UNLV was hoping that he could be and would be a go-to guy, at least in that game he was. Can he be this guy going forward? Is he maturing before our eyes?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's been as promised. Now, in UNLV's last several years, he's not the only freshman that they've had that's lived up to billing. They just had a #1 draft pick in the NBA draft a couple of years ago. So whatever you thought of Anthony Bennett's performance there, and it maybe wasn't the mega-star level, but they had better players on that team too. You know, Vaughn is doing what he's supposed to do, but like you said, UNLV needed to swipe a win at home against, with all due respect to Utah State, not a team that's contending to win the league this year. And yes, it's better to win than lose, but I tend to look at performances and look at performances not just in one game sample, but look at it over 5 or 6 games. It's hard to say that UNLV hasn't been disappointing this year. And that's unfortunately a trend for the last several years, and you're seeing that sort of in the energy of the crowds there, the interest locally. This is one of the most energized fan bases that we have in the league, and they're sort of reflecting the fact that they've been disappointed with what they see. So yes, I think Vaughn is a very, very good player. I think he's going to end up on a lot of the postseason, all-league type teams, and he's good enough to carry UNLV, but they need just more consistency with everything that they're doing. They need to finish off teams like Utah State at home, and they haven't been doing that, just not this year, but the last couple of seasons as well. This is the type of game that they have just struggled against. Nevada earlier this year. The first step to becoming a contending team is take care of business at home. UNLV is not doing that at this point, and it's concerning to me that we're this deep into the season and we're still seeing a team that really hasn't found its stride yet.
You mentioned energized fan bases, teams getting it done at home. Wyoming certainly is doing that. Here's a team that back-to-back overtime wins. They did it on the road at Fresno State, but then in front of a raucous crowd at the AA on Saturday against New Mexico. They get it done in overtime once again. What are we learning about the Cowboys? Here's a team, they're taking teams right down to the wire and finding a way to get it done. Says a lot about this team.
It goes back to their composition. It goes back to the way they play, their comfort level in that level of play, the fact that they do have a star player in Larry Nance, they do have good supporting players. Josh Adams absolutely saved their bacon this past week, drawing the foul in regulation and then hitting the 3 free throws to get it to overtime, a huge, huge moment in that game before whatever happened at the end. Wyoming, we talked about this at the beginning of the season. I thought Wyoming could win the league. And I think they have done record-wise what they needed to do to put themselves in position. They have a shot now. You're 6-1. You took advantage of UNLV at home, New Mexico at home, San Diego State at home. You lost that one, but you got Colorado State on the road, so you sort of got that one back. But now the back end of the schedule is what it is, and they're going to, I think, 4 teams. If I want to credit Jeff Grammer, the beat writer down in Albuquerque, I think he mentioned 4 road games left for Wyoming where they have not won in a number of years. Maybe it was 2007, 2008. They have a legacy of failure, so to speak, at San Diego State, at UNLV. Obviously, the pit is very difficult wherever they're going down the stretch of the season, but they're 6-1. They did what they had to do. They have a team that's good enough to do it. I still believe that 5 losses might get you a share, with the way this is coming out right now, because I think the middle of the league is starting to bubble up and they're going to pick off a couple more teams. But 4, I think, is clearly going to be enough. And, so Wyoming has 3 losses to play with to get where they need to go. You're 14-4 this year. It's almost impossible to think that you're not going to be at least a co-champion. And I'm eager to see what they can do now. If they can get even one of those major road wins, that flips the schedule again and puts Wyoming in very good position.
Another team like San Diego State and Colorado State that is 1 game behind the Cowboys in the race for first place in the Mountain West is Fresno State, a team that continues to play very well. Marvell Harris has played very well. Paul Watson, a great compliment. Now they get Cesar Guerrero, who's had a couple of games now under his belt. What does he add to them going down the stretch? Understanding that he's still getting into game shape and getting to the rhythm of the game.
He adds a ball handler, obviously, a leader that can generate offense. But I think most importantly for this team, which is a very, very poor three-point shooting team, they're below 30% as a team for the season. I believe Guerrero took 23 threes in the first 3 games he's been back, made 8 of them. I'd have to double-check the numbers, but I think that's right. That is a dynamic that is being added to an offense that really has just been inconsistent. And the first 3 games that Guerrero has been back, they have not been really statistically any better than they were before that. But I think it's going to evolve where they're going to have more security with him on the floor. It's obviously another body, so you bump the rotation back a little bit. You have more depth coming off the bench. And they're going to figure out how they want to play with him. And the fact that he is a shot taker and not afraid to take shots. I mean, that you want to talk about one thing about Cesar Guerrero. He's certainly not timid with the trigger. I think this team needs that because they were just not getting enough offense. And when they finally started figuring out the defensive side of it, even with Guerrero back, they've had another couple of clunkers offensively. Now they've won 2 of the 3 games, and I'm really intrigued to see now them going down this week to San Diego State because they already got the Aztecs once. This is the type of game where San Diego State, if they're peaking, this is a 20-point win sometimes. But I think this Fresno State team is dangerous. I think they're starting to believe, and I think Guerrero is going to add an element to them that, especially against a team like San Diego State, where where it's very, very difficult to score around the rim. You have to have perimeter shooting, and he's bringing that to a team that really lacked that before him.
Another team that's building some momentum, figuring it out, is Boise State. They started off conference play 0-3. They've rattled off 4 in a row now, and trying to find those compliments to Derek Marks. Another guy that has chipped in now, Nick Duncan, goes for 20 at Air Force to compliment Marks' 28. They're really only going 6 deep, so these guys are going to be gassed down the stretch. But it's a team that right now, 4 in a row, that speaks for itself. They're figuring out a way to get it done with a limited group.
Leon Rice expressed that same type of surprise. I mean, coaches tend to be a little bit hyperbolistic, as you know. But he said, you know, nobody really expected us to win a game after we lost Anthony Drimick. Now they're 4-3. They've ripped off 4 in a row. Again, this is another team that is not, by all rights, a contender to win the league title. But they are one of the teams now with a Fresno State and maybe a Utah State, and obviously UNLV. You never know when you're going to catch them, so you can catch them on a tough night, and Vaughn could go off. There is a cluster of teams in the middle of the league now that is going to impact the 3 fundamentally best challengers right now. And we haven't seen a lot of losses yet outside of those top 3. San Diego State lost to Fresno, so there was one demerit. They got it back by winning at Wyoming, so they got that credit. Wyoming's only lost to San Diego State. Colorado State has only lost to Wyoming and to New Mexico. I don't want to ignore the Lobos. They're in that mix too. So the league has become very, very interesting to me. The standings have shaken out kind of how we thought it was going to, but I think there's a little bit more depth now than there was a month ago, where we think now games might be dropped to the middle of the pack, and those games are going to impact that. I think Boise State is going to be one of those teams. They've figured out a little bit of something. They've got a little bit more pop. We talked about James Webb III last week. They can hurt you in ways that maybe we didn't think they could without Drimick, and now that's not going to be an easy place to go. So I'm intrigued to see what they can do now. 4 wins in a row, your team starts believing. You know, you don't know. There's some wins to be had in the league, so we'll see what they can do.
Boise State has a very pivotal game. Talked about it earlier. They're going to face Colorado State at Taco Bell Arena coming up on Tuesday. Special programming note, 1 week from today, we're going to have Andy Glockner's midseason Players of the Year, so that'll be a special edition.
Special
edition of the Andy Glockner Show. For Andy Glockner, I'm Jesse Kurtz. Thanks for logging on to the Mountain West Network, and enjoy a pivotal week of Mountain West men's basketball.